Tommy Edman may be the greatest Dodgers trade deadline acquisition ever. Let's talk about him and his big game. Let's get locked on Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one local sports daily podcast network. Locked On, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. This is a daily podcast covering the World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers, bringing you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue. Find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube. All you got to do is search for Locked On Dodgers. You can become an everydayer by listening or watching every day, which can be made easier by subscribing and get notified when episodes are ready or when we're on live on YouTube. Like we are here late on Tuesday night or early Wednesday morning for Jeff. If this is your first time listening watching, welcome. I'm Vince Samperio. That's Jeff Snyder. And we are Locked On Dodgers. We've been Locked On Dodgers since 2019. We've covered the Dodgers for 10 years plus. And we're here to talk about the Dodgers, specifically Tommy Edman, to start this first segment because, Jeff, Tommy Edman got acquired by the Dodgers at the deadline. He hadn't even played last season when they got him. And then he went on to become NLCS MVP, helped lead the Dodgers to a World Series, and now has got off to a really hot start here in the new season with his new extension. And I think I'm ready to call Tommy Edman maybe the Dodgers' best trade. No, not maybe. I'm ready to call Tommy Edman the best trade acquisition the Dodgers have made at the deadline.
Yeah, and I can definitely argue with that if I want to, but it all depends on how you're defining it, because Tommy Edman led the Dodgers to a World Series championship. And you look at previous World Series championships, 2020, there were no big deadline acquisitions that played a part in that. I think the Dodgers' biggest trade deadline trade that year was trading away Ross Stripling. Obviously, that trade deadline was a little bit different because the season was shorter. 88. They brought in John Tudor at the trade deadline, but he didn't even, I think he only pitched one game in the postseason, wasn't at his best, and they traded away Pedro Guerrero for that. So, that's not it. And you keep going back, and the trade deadline wasn't as big a deal in previous years. So, when you look at a trade deadline acquisition who directly helped the Dodgers win a World Series, it's hard to argue. You could definitely look at, yes, Max Scherzer and Trey Turner that was a bigger trade. And either one of them probably, you could make a good case, was a better player, even for the Dodgers, than Tommy Edman. Definitely Trey Turner. Edman, some of the greatness is that it was a little bit unexpected, I guess, but neither of those guys led the Dodgers to a World Series title. And when we were talking before we hit record, and we got all the way back to Manny Ramirez, and yeah, Manny Ramirez came over at the trade deadline in whatever year that was, 2008. And he was awesome that year. And then he was really good the next year until he got suspended for steroids. But again, didn't lead the Dodgers to a World Series title. And in the end, like what Tommy Edman has done, actually winning the NLCS MVP last year, it's kind of hard to vote against him.
Yeah, like you said, a lot of the names you just mentioned, Trey Turner, Max Scherzer, you say Yu Darvish, you can say Manny Machado, definitely Manny Ramirez, a little bit of a different deadline that no longer exists, but Adrian Gonzalez back in 2012. There's a lot of guys. Hanley Ramirez they got earlier than the deadline, but another guy that they traded for and really helped out in that same season and beyond. But yeah, directly impacting World Series chances for sure. Tommy Edman, because none of the other guys were NLCS MVP, and a little bit of a swing change that they've talked about on the broadcast before. And Tommy Edman comes out and was tied for the league lead in home runs before Tyler Soderstrom hit a couple today for the A's. But yeah, I think one of those is that a lot of the other guys fit the Dodgers, but also were big names. Tommy Edman wasn't necessarily a big name, but it's just a guy that fit the Dodgers, exactly what they needed last year. They needed somebody to give them stability in the middle of the field, whether it was shortstop, second base, center field. He gave them that. He gave them a little bit more stability, length in that lineup, and obviously came through in a big way, had a little bit of power. Had that week where he had the big power, had some power in the postseason, and then now continues to improve himself. And, you can see why Andrew Friedman and co. wanted him from before and ultimately ended up getting him. And I think, it does help that it was a little bit unexpected. It also helps that, in reality, they probably didn't give up anyone of consequence to get him. And then that all adds up to Tommy Edman is he's probably growing into one of my favorite players. And just because, I like guys that can play multiple positions and I like guys that come through.
Yeah, Tommy's awesome. Nothing but love for Tommy Edman. Looking at Manny Ramirez, I still, I probably
I love Manny Ramirez. So yeah,
gun to my head, I'd probably still have to say Manny Ramirez was a better acquisition because, like as BC pointed out, he batted .396 for the Dodgers in the regular season the rest of that year. And then if NLDS MVP was a thing that existed, Manny would have won that year. He had a 1743 OPS in the NLDS. He went 5 for 10 with 2 homers plus 4 walks. Just was dominant. And then if the Dodgers had won the NLCS, he would have been the NLCS MVP too. He had a 1748 OPS in the NLCS. He went 8 for 15 with 2 doubles and 2 homers and 7 walks. Like, he was dominant. And so it's like, if Manny Ramirez had the surrounding cast that Tommy Edman had last year, Manny Ramirez probably does win NLCS MVP and then probably would have gone on to win World Series MVP too.
Yeah, I think almost every year we do some episode toward the end of the year where if we could add one former Dodger to the current team, and I'm pretty sure Manny Ramirez has always been my answer. I think maybe Gagne was my answer one year, but I think Manny Ramirez is my answer every other year. And yeah, in pure baseball impact in terms of stats, it's definitely Manny Ramirez. But
the fact that we have to go back to Manny Ramirez and that we're talking about Tommy Edman and Manny Ramirez in the same sentence kind of tells you everything you need to know about what Tommy Edman has been to this team, because Manny Ramirez was otherworldly. Manny Ramirez would be a Hall of Famer if not for stupid personal choices. And we're talking about Tommy Edman with a straight face in the same conversation with that guy.
Yeah, and we're not one known for hyperbole on this show, but and I don't think saying Tommy Edman is the best trade deadline acquisition is necessarily hyperbole, because of what it led to. I know I talked about O'Neal Cruz with somebody at work earlier today, and basically it's like they said, is he ever going to pan out then more than just a highlight reel type guy? And I was like, honestly, I don't know, but that's somebody the Dodgers traded for Tony Watson, but Tony Watson and Tony Cingrani in 2017 almost helped, not directly, but led the Dodgers to a World Series title, and it would have been the first World Series title in my lifetime. And honestly, I wouldn't have cared who they traded for at that point. And Tony Watson would be held in even higher regard than I have him now. It's just a guy that was really good for the Dodgers that year. But yeah, I think, and the fact that Edman, he had the extra year, but then they, added on to that. And realistically, they're probably still going to benefit from him for the next 5 years.
And he's just such a good dude too. Like, he's so easy to root for. And I love how many guys there are on this Dodgers team who just, like I like guys who play for the Dodgers, but I was a huge Mookie Betts fan before he came to the Dodgers. Same with Freddie Freeman, same with Shohei Ohtani. They're just so likable. In addition to being, obviously they're great baseball players. That's part of what I like about them, but they're just very likable. And, the Tommy Edman fits in right there. He's not the former MVP like those guys, but it's hard to picture somebody disliking Tommy Edman.
Yeah, and for this Dodger team, last year he fit a role, this year he's fitting a role. And if you're a little unclear, maybe you missed the game and not sure why we're talking about Tommy Edman in this regard after a 6-2 win against the Rockies. Well, he had a big day. He had 4 hits, had a chance for 5 there late in the game, and
he blew it.
Yeah. But either way, and then he plays second base. He moves to the outfield. He's been everything the Dodgers could have asked for, and hopefully we get more people starting to play closer to Tommy Edman's level than the level they're currently playing at, and the Dodgers would be in a much better place.
Yeah, Tommy Edman's season OPS, it slots in right between Mookie Betts and Shohei Ohtani. Pretty good place to be.
Not bad. In the actual game, the Dodgers, or Dave Roberts, made a decision to pull Landon Knack, and I think this might be one of the few times where we aren't 100% on board with it. So we're going to talk about that. So make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the perfect app to play daily fantasy sports. And with basketball and hockey playoffs heating up, there's no better way to turn your sports knowledge into real rewards than with Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy. With Prize Picks, it's very easy. You pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and you're in. You can even combine players across sports, basketball, hockey, baseball, and more for your chance to win up to 2,000 times your cash. Here's what to look forward to. I like crossing over sports. I like picking a couple things from each sport. I actually had Tommy Edman and some hits, more on his hits. In this one, I had Steph Curry and more on whatever his points were at the time. And there was different things to build out, and got a little bit of a good night for myself on Prize Picks, and you can do the same. So download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. I want to thank you for making Locked On Dodgers one of the listens of your day, whether it's first listen, last listen, probably last listen if you're listening live right now. We appreciate those of you that listen to Locked On Dodgers and continue to listen to Locked On Dodgers. And if you're new, we appreciate you for tuning in, and I hope you stick around. We got a lot to get into as the Dodgers season continues on. The Dodgers won on Tuesday on Jackie Robinson night with all the players wearing 42. We'll get into a little bit more about the game because it was a 3-hour game, which is not ideal for these days. But the Dodgers won, so you'll take the 3 hours. But there was a decision made in the middle of the game by Dave Roberts to pull Landon Knack in the top of the 5th inning after he got the leadoff hitter in the lineup and in the inning out. And then he pulled Landon Knack with 65 pitches, went to Jack Dreyer. Jack Dreyer ended up issuing a walk and then got out of the inning after that. But normally, when these decisions are made, we can find the justification for it. And even with this one, we can find the justification for it. But with Bobby Miller looming to start on Wednesday, and with the Dodgers bullpen, still seemingly trying to catch its breath sometimes with some of the usage they've had to go through so far this season, I think Roberts, at that time, the game was 5-2. Landon Knack didn't pitch particularly well in this game. Again, there's a lot of ways to talk yourself into it, but I would have maybe gone with a hitter-by-hitter approach for the rest of that game.
Yeah, and I could definitely see that. I assume it just had to do with the third time through the order, because that is a real thing. Most pitchers, almost all pitchers, are significantly worse third time facing a batter in a game. They did let him face Ezekiel Tovar for the third time, but then went with the lefty Jack Dreyer. And I would suspect that if Knack hadn't looked so shaky in the 4th inning, I think that's probably what maybe kind of pushed them over the edge to say, okay, we're not going to let him face these guys a third time when he just got knocked around a little bit the second time through the order. I would guess that played a big part in the decision to have him. When you look at, there is no right answer, and that's always the hard part about these managerial decisions, is that there is absolutely no way to find out what would have happened if Landon Knack had stayed in there to face Martini and Farmer. But when you look at, you had Martini and then Farmer and then McMahon, so 2 out of 3 next guys coming up were lefties. I always go back to that 2017 World Series when Rich Hill people say he was pulled too early from the game. Not 2018 World Series when Rich Hill was pulled too early from the game. That was a different scenario. But this one had, very similar, because it was game 2 and it was about to be the third time through the order against an Astros lineup that was heavy right-handed at the top of the order, hit lefties really well. And I have always been in the very small minority that thinks that Dave Roberts made the right call to pull Rich Hill when he did in that game. And I think that if Kenley Jansen and Brandon Morrow had done their jobs, the Dodgers would have won that game and won the World Series. But ultimately, it's so easy to second guess managers because you can't ever know what would have happened otherwise. And I think that's basically what it boiled down to in this was it's the third time through. We have the arms. Where it gets questionable is knowing that Bobby Miller's pitching tomorrow, because we have no idea what to expect from Bobby Miller.
He cut his last start short, so it's not like a full rest, right? Isn't he on like 4 days rest with
on Bobby Miller?
Yeah.
I can't. All those minor league games run together in my mind. So
I want to say he pitched Friday, but they cut it short.
I know he only went. Yeah, they pulled him in the third inning in his last start, but I'll look and see when that was. But yeah, I mean, the fact is, even a fully rested Bobby Miller pitching for the first time in the majors since last year when he was bad. I'm sure they're not expecting 6 innings from him. I think they'll probably be happy if they can get the 4 1/3 that they got from Landon Knack. But then the Thursday off day comes into play, I guess.
Yeah, like you said, I don't think it was the wrong decision. I just think at this point, with how the bullpen's gone, 65 pitches. I know Knack hadn't pitched that great. He probably got a little lucky to, he had runners on every inning, after second inning for sure, third inning for sure, fourth inning was shaky. He probably was pitching better than what he should have been. But yeah, I just would have liked to have seen, all right, one more batter. Even if he gives up a home run, you're still at 5-3, you pull him, and I don't think you're that worse off. But it worked out for the Dodgers, and it worked out that the Dodgers picked up that extra run there late in the game. Luis Garcia got to close it out. They didn't have to use another high leverage arm. So with the day off on Thursday, they're in a decent spot. But like I said, not wrong, not bad, just.
Yeah, Bobby Miller's last start in AAA was on the 11th, so he will have 5 full days of rest. So that extra day on top of regular, he only threw 55 pitches in that start. He threw 91 in the start before, so he's fully built up. So I think they can throw him out there for 90 plus pitches. And, if he's decent, you could get through 5 with that, maybe even 6 if he's really decent. I still think they'd be happy with the 4 1/3 they got from Knack. But overall, the fact is, as they are in a kind of good stretch right now with the starting pitching with Yamamoto and Glasnow and even Sasaki and then Dustin May all getting relatively deep in games. Like there's almost been times when guys have come in and I'm like, he might actually be rusty. It might not be overwork. It might be underwork right now. And so like I said, all this stuff goes into it. And it might just be they watched Landon Knack pitch that 4th inning and thought we are scared to let him do this very much longer.
They watched Landon Knack last year and realized this is most of the time when he ran out a little bit of gas. And yeah, like I said, not a wrong decision by any means. Just I'm always one to let the starting pitcher go until it's really time to take him out. But
and that's something, one of the few plays where you and I are different, because I am a big believer in a pitcher's cruising until he's not, and I'd always rather take him out 1 batter too early than 1 batter too late. And that's just a different philosophy. I'm actually looking at Landon Knack's 3rd time through the order stats right now. He's actually, this is tricky. He's actually been quite a bit better the 3rd time through the order, but caveat, he's only faced 20 batters a 3rd time.
I was gonna say, probably not a lot.
Yeah, so he's faced 117 batters the 1st time through, 111 the 2nd time through, and 20 the 3rd time through. So they are pretty committed to this. Right now, you're going to have to be a little better the first 2 times through before we let you try a 3rd time.
Yeah, and with the bullpen, obviously I know I mentioned that they probably had more usage. That was a stat over the weekend. They've obviously had a nice string where the last 4 games they've had the pitcher go at least 5 innings, with 3 of those being 6 innings. They're in a good spot. I think I saw a tweet from somebody that mentioned that they hadn't had anyone go back-to-back since April 5th and 6th, I believe, and that was Vesia. So they are in a good spot. I just was thinking, I think I was thinking the worst of Miller tomorrow and thinking, now you're going to have to patch together, 7 innings. But hopefully that's not the case.
Yeah, and it's also always weird to see a guy pulled early in a game, mid-inning, after getting an out. It's just
after letting them face the leadoff, hitter of
one of their
lineup.
best hitters. Yeah, it's not something we see very often. I'm just going to pop this comment up on the screen just because every time BC uses these emojis to say bullpen, my old man eyes see cow feather. So I'm like, what in the world is a strong cow feather? Oh, bullpen. So I'm old, BC. Use words.
There we go.
And get off my lawn.
Regardless of the differences we have in sometimes our philosophies, we both love baseball, and there's little things about baseball that make us love it. So we're going to talk a little bit about those next. So make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing better than catching an MLB game live, whether it's the crack of the bat, the roar of the crowd, the smell of ballpark food, whatever gets you going in terms of watching baseball games live. Game Time can help you get there. And if you're looking to go last minute, and they make getting tickets easier than ever with last minute deals, all-in pricing, and the lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the stress out of buying MLB tickets. Plus, tickets drop as game time gets closer, meaning you can score an incredible deal. Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On. And as the Dodgers season, they have one more home game on this homestand. Then they go away for a little bit, but then they'll come back at the end of the month. So you can count on Game Time to help you get tickets that meet your needs, whether it's a spontaneous game night or you're planning ahead for June, July, and beyond. Whatever it is, Game Time can help you out. They got Game Time picks, which makes finding the best deals effortless, filters out all the fluff, and gives you the top discounts in the stadium. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you for being an everydayer. If you are one, an everydayer is just someone that listens or watches every day. You can become an everydayer simply by listening or watching every day. We know there are a lot of you in the chat right now on live. We know there's probably a lot of you listening on on Wednesday morning because games when they go 3 hours and then I have to drive home and you're waiting for that. It's not the earliest time to be listening, especially if you have a real job where you have to go and wake up early and all that type of stuff. So we appreciate those of you that are listening right now that are everydayers, and we appreciate those of you that are going to become everydayers. If you want to go beyond the podcast, you can become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. Get text directly from us. Get some exclusive looks from the stadium. You would have seen Blake Snell throwing before I posted it on Twitter and some other stuff. So, there's definitely some incentive to become a Locked On Dodgers insider. All right, Jeff. Will Smith had a good night. He continues to crush the ball with runners in scoring position. The top of the order, Ohtani and Mookie didn't do too much today, but the rest of the guys did. There wasn't a specific third segment that we wanted to talk about in terms of directly from the game or from the Dodgers in general, which is a good thing because they won 2 in a row. But there's just little things about baseball when you're watching. And on a night where we're celebrating Jackie Robinson and his legacy, and all the guys are wearing 42, and we got some looks at Kareem addressing the Dodgers and the Rockies before the game. There was a lot of pageantry in a night like this, but beyond the pageantry, there's little things about baseball that just make baseball, and we're going to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was so I spent this evening, I watched the first 5 innings of the game on my phone because I was coaching my sons. They're playing Sid League together. They're 4 years apart, and so we have my younger son playing up. My older son graduates next month, and so this is the first time and last time that they have ever played on the same baseball team, and so it's a lot of fun. But so I was watching the game on my phone, but during the game, my son's best friend came in to pitch, and this kid's name is Ben. He hasn't played baseball since he was 12. He was one of that's how Logan and Ben became friends, was playing baseball together, and Ben just kind of got bored with baseball and stopped playing. But he pitched tonight for us and still has a really good arm, pitched really well, and it was fun to watch. And I was talking to the guy who runs the league, and he's like, "Where did this kid come from?" I said, "He used to be a really good ball player." And then so I was telling him all that, and he's like, "Yeah, I mean, baseball is kind of boring." And I'm like, "Dude, I thought we were having a pleasant conversation here." But I was just like, that kind of got my mind on. There's so much to love about baseball, and then. So I was already kind of in that mindset. And then I got home and watched the rest of the game. And when the Dodgers scored their 6th run with 2 outs, Shohei on second base, and Freddie pokes that base hit to left field, And if you look at the like the location where Shohei was when the left fielder fielded the ball, it's basically identical to where Giancarlo Stanton was when Teoscar Hernandez fielded the ball in the World Series last year. And and I actually said out loud, "Oh, I hope he doesn't get thrown out." And then he was safe easily, partly because Zach Veen doesn't have the arm that Teoscar has, partly because Shohei doesn't have the legs that Giancarlo has in a good way, but also just because it's hard to make that throw perfectly. And I realize that's one of the little things I love about baseball, where you go in a situation like that, even though there's a very real chance. I mean, there's a 26% chance that Shohei gets thrown out there with the better throw, but you kind of have to force the outfielder to make that throw, because even big league ball players don't make the perfect throw very often. And we talk all the time about how pitchers make mistakes that don't get punished. And is when a pitcher has 3 mistakes in a row get punished, it looks like he was terrible, when really it was sometimes just bad luck on those pitches. There's all these little things. And that was one of the little things about baseball that I love, is a play like that where you've got a fast, great base runner and you say, just go for it and let's make this guy make a play. And he didn't make the play.
Yeah, and that's runners on base obviously helps with that in terms of like the Dodgers directly. They with baseball, there's a lot of different little things, and you look at some stuff that is quirks and some stuff that happens more often. Obviously, something like that happens a little more often. You see quirks like in the Padres Cubs game where Manny Machado hits 2 foul balls, popped them up. The Cubs can't make the play on either of them, and then Machado hits a homer. And that's one of those things that if you're a Cubs fan, you probably didn't love it. If you're, even if you're us Dodger fans, we didn't necessarily love it. But it's one of those things where if you're watching and it happens for a game that you don't care about, or your team specifically where it favors you, it's one of those little things like, yeah, how often do you get something like that in other sports? I don't want to catch myself in a bind here talking about other sports, but realistically, baseball, I think when it talks to boring, I think people maybe mistake boring for it's differently paced. And I think that's why I love baseball, because you can watch the game and you're not gonna, you might miss something if you look away, but you're in the presence of the game and the game is happening in front of you, and you don't, you can have a conversation, you can do something else, you can do whatever, but ultimately you're still going to catch part of the game, and I think that's where people get mistakes. And obviously, if you don't know the game, that helps too. So
yeah, and I also love that there's so much to see in a game. Like when you're, and this is true in other sports too, except there's not, like in a football game, all of the action at the start of the play is right next to each other. And in a baseball game, everybody's spread out. And so you can watch, I remember going to games, went to a Dodgers Rays game with my son years ago. And I said, just watch Kevin Kiermaier in center field, because he is so, like, just watch what he's doing as the pitch is being delivered and stuff, and then as my boys got older and start having positions they like playing. And so, hey, they both play some third base. Watch Nolan Arenado. Like, Nolan Arenado is not a supremely gifted athlete. He's not a fast runner. He's not super quick necessarily. And yet he's the best defensive third baseman in baseball. Why is that? So let's watch him, and you can do that. And there are times when we miss 5, 6 pitches in a row because we're not watching the pitches. We are watching. It's why I used to always give people a hard time when they would say when they get mad about the league adding nets, and they're like, just pay attention to the game and then you don't need nets. It's like, well, if you think that the only way to pay attention to the game is to watch the ball the whole time, you're missing out on 80% of the game, because there's so much going on. And it's, definitely one of those little things that I love is just watching the guys who are away from the action. And you do get that sometimes. You can watch. I used to love watching Rudy Gobert when he was playing for the Jazz, watching him play defense and how, he could affect 4 different players at once, and you see it with, elite football players and the way they draw defenders to them or whatever. There's that in other sports too, but it's not as spread out as it is in baseball. And so you actually have to make an effort to look at these things.
Yeah, and that's, everyone can appreciate differently. I actually saw somebody keeping score today at the game, which you don't see very often anymore, but that's a way a lot of people used to be able to enjoy the game and keep themselves, in the game or remember what's going on. And, I see it a lot in the press box, guys, people keeping score, but not so much out in the field. And yeah, I mean, when you're watching, the Dodgers specifically, when you're watching the Dodgers, it's, we get to talk. We would have never have met each other if, the Dodgers and baseball weren't a thing. And, I've talked a lot, when Vin passed and when I got to meet Ken Griffey a couple of years ago, and different things of like, I wouldn't be where I'm at without, all these things kind of lining up and touching each other. And yeah, I mean, when you watch the Dodgers, obviously, Shohei stealing a base is fun. Mookie hitting a home run, Freddie inside out single to left field. Tommy Edman right now, the way he's hitting, and, Will Smith, the way he's hit, like there's a lot of different guys to like. And obviously the pitching, there's a lot to like. And yeah, it just all kind of adds up to why we're ultimately here, me and you. And, it's always fun to talk about baseball.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've talked a lot about how much I love going to games with family. And so many of my memories with my all three of my kids, I've taken to Dodger Stadium, even just one-on-one trips and stuff. Jackie Robinson Day 6 years ago, I was there with my daughter. You and I saw each other at that game. Jock Peterson at the walk-off homer. That was Yasiel Puig's first game back with the Reds against the Dodgers. He homered off Kershaw. That was a super fun game. The Max Muncy walk-off home run in Game 3 of the World Series in the 18th inning. I was there with my two sons and my dad and my uncle. Clayton Kershaw's only career home run was my first game as a season ticket holder. I was there with my brother and my dad and my uncle again. And my uncle's a Giants fan, so that was fun to watch his reaction to that. Just so many different, and then friends, like there's people I've met through this podcast. Like one of my closest friends now is actually there's several people now who I consider close personal friends who I met because they listened to my podcast and reached out to me. And now we've become friends. There's Heather and Trevor who live here near me, and, they listen to the podcast, and that's how I met them. And now my son took their daughter to prom, a couple of years ago there. And Steve, and his son Levi, I've been to 5 or 6 Dodger games with them. And you mentioned scorekeeping. Levi's 10 years old, 10, I think, and he keeps score at the games. And like, it's just so much fun. I've made these friends because of baseball, and which is good because I'm not good at making friends in any other way,
Yeah, if you can't talk sports, it's very hard for me to find common ground with you, but that was more of a me thing than a you thing, if that's the case. But yeah, I mean, it was, Dodgers won the first 2 of the series like they should. They got, if you're scoreboard watching already in April, I would say, you don't have to do that, but the Padres lost, the Giants lost, the Diamondbacks won. So, a pretty solid day for the Dodgers all around. They'll go for the sweep on Wednesday with Bobby Miller on the mound. If you are up earlier in the day, Clayton Kershaw will be pitching for OKC. I can't imagine he'd be going more than an inning, maybe depending how fast his pitch, or depending how many pitches he throws, he might go a little bit longer. But yeah, that's another part of loving baseball, watching Clayton Kershaw pitch. So.
Yeah, get up early. If you got an MLB TV account, you can watch that live watch all the Oklahoma City games. So check it out.
Yeah. All right, Jeff, you got anything else?
No, I love baseball.
That'll do it. That's a good note to end on. Dodgers win again. That's another good note to end on. It was prettier than Monday's win, so we'll take that. But we'll take all wins any way they come. That's going to do it for today's episode. Thank y'all for listening. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day. Make sure to find us wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. All you got to do is search for Locked On Dodgers. You can become an everydayer by listening and watching every day, which can be made easier by subscribing and get notified when our episodes are ready or when we're going live on YouTube. You can check out Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can go beyond the podcast, come Locked On Dodgers Insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. Get text directly from us and join our Discord server to talk baseball with other Dodge fans. You can also find us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Locked On Dodgers. Jeff's on Twitter at SnyDog. I'm at Vince91. You can DM us any questions or comments. You can also send those via email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or via voicemail text at 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope to be here with us. When you're in your car, if you're at home, text my device, play a podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.
We'll talk to you tomorrow.